I'm inside a pair of new Porsche products, the GTS. We have the Targa and the Coupe. Now, there is so much technical detail that we're going to cover later on, but I'm going to talk about the differences between the two. One being, this is an open-top experience. Things like the roll hoop can go silver or black. You have the traditional 911 interior space here, and it depends on what color you choose. This is the chalk color, so your deviated stitching on the inside matches. You can match your gauge cluster color, your watch or clock in the center dashboard. And I've talked about this with the new 911 or the 992. This is a far superior interior space in terms of technology, ergonomics. Take the door, for example. I can fit a bottle in there. I can fit my sunglasses. I can fit my phone. It's amazing. You're not penalized like traditional sports cars. The center stack has been cleaned up. And despite the last generation being littered with buttons, and even like the 718, it's one of my biggest complaints, this has this element of cleanliness. It gives you all the physical controls that you could possibly want. It's easy to access the commonly used functions, your drive mode selector. All of this is focused on connecting you with the car while bringing this into the modern age of technology. So let's talk about that. The gauge pods, for example, you have your 5 gauges here, and they look tremendous. When you look at it from all angles, it has this specialness. The way that the dashboard is contoured, the way that they use and integrate different materials. Now, this is littered with race text, but you don't have to have it that way. It's just the way everything flows together here almost beautifully. Now, I'm going to go back to the gauge cluster for a second because this is something I complained about with the previous 992. With my seating position, I cannot see the outer 2 gauges. And when I have the map up on the right side, it is completely obscured by the steering wheel, and then my hand makes it worse. So there's little things that are not perfect, but most of the experience in here is about as best as you can do a sports car that is usable every day on the street. Now, the GTS is trying to blend multiple things here. They're trying to take a little bit from the Turbo S, and they're trying to take a little bit from the GT3, which we'll talk about during the drive. So you have the sports seat, the basic sports seat. You can go with the multi-adjustable seat like I'm in right now, and you can get the carbon bucket. And with this sports seat, it tries to find a middle ground. The adjustability is great. It hugs your hips and your shoulders, but my big problem here is apparently my shoulders are too wide. I feel like the seat does not support me enough on the backside, and it just feels a lot more flimsy than the seat you get in the Macan, which is amazingly padded. And I know there's some weight difference there too, but you know, again, these are cars that you have to get in yourself and figure out, what do I want? What do I want? How do I want to configure it? How much money am I willing to pay? And then you can start to add the features or take away features that suit your personal taste. Now, of course, with the GTS, you have multiple top options. You have the Coupe, you have the regular convertible, and the Targa. This is the Targa, and when you look at the top operation, it is a bit slow, but there's this mechanical sturdiness to it. And when you're on the highway, the noise levels are extremely low. Now, let me talk about 2 packages. You have the GTS pack, which adds all the race text, which is Porsche's version of Alcantara. It's all over the place, and if you love it, you're going to like that package. They also have the lightweight package, which bridges the gap between a GTS and a GT3. You get a rear seat delete, you get sound deadening deleted, you get thinner glass in the doors and the back glass as well. And it just gives it that more alive feeling when you drive it. And of course, at the sacrifice of interior noise levels, when you're on the highway, it is a much more buzzy experience. But again, they're trying to target different types of people. That's why there's so many different trim levels and ability to customize this car the way you want it. But we're gonna head out on the road, and we're gonna skip the shop segment this time until we get back to our home state to take a look at the underbody. Jack, let's do it. Yeah, that's pretty proper, Mark. What are we in? We're in the Targa GTS four-wheel drive variant. This is the second most popular GTS trim level. So you have the Coupe, convertible, and this Targa. They purposely made this softer and more luxurious than the Coupe and convertible. But out here, Mark, I can't tell.
Feels good to me.
God, this thing is, it's kind of like easy mode out here.
Yeah, it is.
With the PDK, with the rear steer, and the PDCC. This is still an extraordinarily capable car.
Yeah, with all the on-camber turns and everything, you just feel like you're invincible to the point where you look down and you're like, yeah, I'm kind of exceeding every speed limit in the world driving this thing, and it's just so enjoyable to drive, even on normal commutes. And we were stuck in traffic, and I'm like, okay, this thing's gonna suck. And as it turns out, it was super comfortable. I didn't even know I was in a sports car. And then you get out here to do double duty as that professional master driver. Love it.
Yeah,
Loved every second of it.
This is an incredible car. And yes, this is the softer variant. And where you notice it is in the really tight corners in the front end. Because this is not the full-blown passive sport suspension, there seems to be more front end bob, and it doesn't seem
it's
quite
just softer.
as direct.
You can feel it in the front end. It's not as much work to get it to steer. It doesn't, I don't know, it's just less fatiguing to kind of get this thing and chuck it through corners. But as a side effect, it's not as direct. But again, this is not supposed to be a pure track car. It's supposed to give you some of that feeling and the daily drivable comfortability and being connected with your environment to a certain extent.
Yes. I will say this is a PDK car. The Coupe we're about to get into is a manual. How does this PDK feel to you?
Let me tell you, Jack, it's amazing. It's like the best transmission. It's the best automatic transmission. Aside from like supercar stuff, you get into Ferraris and things like that, of course, you're gonna notice that there's a lot of speed, and this is unbelievably responsive to everything you do. It's better than a manual transmission in every objective way. It's just, you feel a little bit more of that video game-ness of it. I constantly feel like I'm just downshifting and upshifting unnecessarily because it's so easy and it sounds so good. But you know what? You know what you're getting with a Porsche. It's the best, pretty much best automated manual. You got an amazing engine, amazing chassis, a ton of work done to this car. I want to see what it's like getting into the Coupe and have you go ape shit in that.
All right, Mark. We're in the lightweight pack equipped 992 GTS. This is...
Oh my God, dude. You're gonna break my sternum. Oh, these brakes, this car is...
this car's amazing.
on a car, on roads like this is fucking unbelievable. Holy shit.
So clearly, this is the enthusiast model. You have a manual, you have an interior sound deadening delete, you have rear steer, you have PDCC, you have a lighter weight battery, you have these carbon back buckets. You have everything you would want to make this thing somewhat, or actually extraordinarily track capable. The GTS as standard has the Turbo S steel brakes. This car has carbon ceramics optioned. You have the same 3-liter twin turbo engine found in the Carrera S, which now makes like 473 horsepower, and it accomplishes the extra horsepower with an increase in boost. Actually, when they were developing the 992 Carrera and Carrera S, they started with the GTS, and then they detuned the subsequent models.
And retuned it per the lower trim levels. And you're getting that 3 extra pounds of boost that you're getting at this top trim is responsible for what, that 30 extra horsepower or something like that, and the additional torque.
And as we both know, Porsche numbers are somewhat, let's call them underrated.
Yeah, that's to put it nicely.
This is more like 473 at the wheel, which means it feels like well over 500
this thing's
horsepower.
Flying, dude. This thing is, I mean, you can see how fast we're going compared to the bicyclist in front of us. To me, these cars have gotten to a level of, it's this dual purpose. It still gives somebody that loves driving a real connected feel, and it also does enough for you, somebody that doesn't have a high driving aptitude. All these systems work so well together.
Like if you turn back on PASM Sport and you leave the rev match on, you could be a relative novice and feel on a back road like this, feel like you could get closer to your limits without dying.
Right, and again, like the rear wheel steering that they add here, all of the things that you get on the upper trim between like the turbo, you know, like when you get to the higher end Porsche products, including the GT products, this has such a similar feel that you might even argue, is this good enough instead of getting a GT car?
See,
no, but it's close, you know, on the street, you're gonna really have a hard time. I think this almost is just as fast as the GT3.
I think in the real world, under the top of the RPM band, where you spend most of your time as a human being, this car is probably faster than a GT3 due to its torque.
Yeah.
Yes, you miss out on some of the theater, and the other reality is, you or I or most people can't get an allocation for a GT3 to begin with, and this doesn't have the same compromises in ride quality, even though yes, this is stiffer. This receives a 50% increase in spring rate in the front because this is the lightweight package coupe variant.
And it is louder. It does get rid of some of the creature comfort feeling in terms of sound and refinement. But what it makes up for it is when you have it on a road like this, which most of us never do, oh my God, is it just such a joy to drive. Add the manual transmission feel. It doesn't matter what trans you get, but even the manual trans is such a joy to rip around.
I don't see a lot of cons with this car. And what do you think about what it competes with? We've driven the AMG GT, Aston Martin, like Vanquish or whatever, the Vantage, the V8 variant.
Yeah.
This car is on another planet.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of performance, you know, you could argue the look and the specialness of it, you know, which I always talk about Porsches. It may not have that flair that those cars have, but when you do this, I'm taking this car, obviously.
I guess, Mark, before we get into the final thoughts, we go back to Illinois and move back to our flat cornfields. Is there anything else you want to talk about these cars?
I mean, we've covered the 911, the 992, with the exception of a few of them, and I think this is just proof to me that, after driving the generations, like I know people get caught up in the air-cooled generation and this, you know, this is such an engineering achievement to still do this and go flying through here and then still have the comfort to drive back home.
And know it's going to be reliable.
Yeah.
You're not going to worry about it breaking down on a track day.
Yeah.
That's why I love these cars so much, Mark. They are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really starting to understand it the more and more we do videos on these things. So let's get into the final thoughts, Jack. We'll tie up any loose ends.
All right. Final thoughts on the 911 GTS. If you're like me and you walked into this car thinking, why would someone buy this thing when the GT3 is so similarly priced? I will tell you this. After spending a lot of time in the GTS and two separate 992 GT3s, the Touring and a PDK wing car, I will tell you they have remarkably different characters and they are designed for very different things. The GT3 is a far more dedicated track or wide canyon road car and is best experienced in those environments, where the GTS is a far more do-everything approach. It is probably 90 to 95% as capable on a racetrack as a GT3, and it is about 50% more usable on the street. It's softer, it is better riding, it has a more usable power band, and unlike a GT3, you could probably actually buy one and get an allocation for one. The GTS is also a car that you can kind of configure to your liking. If you want a more long-distance GT or everyday grand touring car, you can spec out a Targa with all the luxury goodies, or if you want a GT3 substitute or a more balanced weekend warrior approach, you can make this a manual coupe with a lightweight package or PDK. So, what are the pros and cons of this vehicle? Well, it has some of the value bits found on some of the better 911s or more expensive 911s, like the big brakes off the 911 Turbo S, the rear suspension design off the Turbo S with the rear helper spring, and some popular performance options found on the Carrera S, all baked into the price of the GTS, making it a value. And again, I hate to say that because this car is still a ton of money. And on top of that as well, the other big pro is this car is brilliantly engineered. And built, when you compare this to something like the Aston Martin Vantage or the AMG GT, I am nowhere as worried about this car's reliability. So what are the cons? And really, there are two. First, it's a lot of money. This car, when you option everything out in Targa form, can push almost $200,000 or more if you go even crazier with the options palette. And it's not particularly flashy. If you are the kind of man or woman who wants to let everyone know that they are John Rich, this might not do it for you. So with that said, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon. And please don't forget to tune into our long-form docu-series video on the GT3. We have 3 separate videos coming out: the 991 GT3, the 992 GT3, and the Cup car. And this is all with Porsche factory support. So with that said, see you soon.